Hi, folks. This is Dr. Kat Shrier with WaterCitizen Media Foundation and The Water Show. And I'm here with George Hawkins, who has been one of the best spokespersons for the water utilities and just all the changes that are going on. And we had the pleasure of, I commented when you came in this morning that you're following me everywhere or vice versa. And we end up at a lot of the same meetings. Mm-hmm. Right? And I got to tell you, I've heard bits and pieces of your, the way that you tell your stories and the stories that you share about what's going on in water for a long time. And this morning here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Better Business, Better World, mainstreaming the circular economy, you were on fire. You really did a nice job today.
Well, the topic is such a good one. I mean, what's happening in our industry is being driven by really harsh realities. We have far more extreme weather events on both ends. Just in Washington, D.C., on the West Coast, we've had the worst winters, the hottest summers, the heaviest rains, all systems that put pressure on any infrastructure systems. You have, in one sense, a system that even if it were up-to-date, modern, would be a challenge because of the extremes that are now. Infrastructure is not designed for extremes. It's designed for common. Second is as we're updating and improving the infrastructure, how difficult this has become for our lower and fixed income customers. We just had finished last week the program in DC where I go to every ward of the city and talk to our customers. We had 500 people come to talk to me. And the most compelling witness testimony we had was from fixed income, what I would call the working poor. Folks who are just barely on the line of a very fixed income. And the larger the water bill becomes, they have to cut other things because water is obviously essential. And how compelling their story is, even as I know the financial need. And then this third is how the business model is changing. Historically, we weren't well known. Most people didn't know where the water comes from or where it went when it went down the drain. So we were invisible. And independent of that, it was big centralized treatment facilities. And what we're trying to do now is have every home and every business engaged in the water cycle themselves, capturing water in a green roof, capturing outside in a bioswale, reusing that water from disconnecting their storm leader so that they can use that water on site, grow more green, use less water off the system. But that's dispersing responsibility out to the network rather than at a centralized facility. And all of that has required a complete change in the way we look at our work and how we interact with our customers. I think all to the good, but it's still been a huge challenge.
Now, since you brought it up about the fixed income folks, and as we started to discuss before I hit the record button, is we're getting ready to relocate to LA. The WaterCitizen Media Foundation, thank you. We have an opportunity to work on one of the running dry films on water and food security in the Central Valley, which is going to be completely awesome. I have been on Capitol Hill for 8 years now, in a large townhouse subletting to interns, and that's part of how we've been able to fund WaterCitizen until we were able to get our 501c3 earlier this year. But it essentially is a fixed income. I mean, the interns, they're not getting paid. They expect, rent should be a certain amount and utilities should be a certain amount, and I can't pass along those costs. So it's been tough. I've got a landlord raising the rent for the roof. I've got interns who don't want to pay more, and actually need to get on public assistance this year because of all the money that I put into WaterCitizen. And how I didn't hear anything about that, about what you talked about today, about the opportunities for assistance with the water bill. Because I see it for a 4-bedroom house. Yeah, it's been a big hit.
I look at it in several quadrants. What's happening across the country, almost in every city, almost no matter what their history is this incredible need to update old, breaking down infrastructure. The median age of a water main in Washington, D.C., nation's capital, is almost 80 years. That's median. So half the pipes are older than that. We have
Right,
30% were put in before 1900. It's
Oh,
sort of crazy. So we know we have to reinvest. And unfortunately, for the 80, 90 years that these pipes have worked just fine,
right.
all we were charging our customers was the operational costs, not the capital replacement.
Sure.
So today we have still the operating costs, which are actually going up because the system breaks more and needs more maintenance. We also need to capital replace. That's something our customers aren't used to paying. And then we have huge mandated compliance costs to the tunes of billions of dollars. All three of those are hitting at once. Now, in most jurisdictions, water utilities are having a hard time raising rates. And to me, the challenge on raising rates, and here's how is first, super low income. And this is we do have a program in DC that if you're at LIHEAP level, which is the low income heating assistance program, their income guidelines, Department of Energy put out. If you satisfy that obligation, which is quite low, there's a program. But if you're above the line, that's it's not that that's not a difficult group in low income, but we have something. You're above the line, assistance across the board almost evaporates. And that in Washington, DC, what I would call the working poor, people who are, or the
retirees, certainly a lot of federal retirees choose to stay here
in the city, or our personnel who are just as rank and file, really good workers, but are getting a good middle class income. Can they afford to live in this city? So we've done two things on the front. First, by the way, there is work on the Hill to create an assistance program for water like there is for energy, which to me is a very good idea. I personally believe bills ought to go out to customers with full cost, so without tremendous subsidies. But we do need a low-income assistance for water, just like you do for energy, for exactly the same reason. Those are people who can't pay the bill.
Absolutely.
Now, what we did in DC that has just kicked in is we created something called the Lifeline rate. So for every residential customer, including you, the first quadrant of water use is discounted in price. Which gives an incentive to save water down below that amount, which is 400 cubic feet of water use a month. That's brand new because we knew we had to create something that would create an incentive for customers on the residential side who don't satisfy the really low income but are in. Is that enough? What I have argued is that, at least as from my perspective in the water industry, we're not looking for big bailouts or big subsidies from the federal government. I know that will never come. But if the federal government focused on a program for the lowest income customers, like it's done for energy, that would allow us to take the funds we're currently using for that group and shift them to the working poor. And I think that's actually who I hear from more in our rate hearings. And the challenge there's a challenge for those customers and how we serve them, but there's also a challenge in the big picture. In many jurisdictions, when that challenge comes up, the rates aren't increased because of concerns. That is also not the right answer, because then if the rates aren't increased, the revenue doesn't come in, you can't update the infrastructure and things get worse. So we have to figure out a solution, and we're doing what we can on our own at DC Water. This would be a great place to emulate an existing successful program with multi-decade track record, which is LIHEAP for water. And interestingly, LIHEAP is subsidizing low-income customers for investor-owned utilities, mainly in the power sector, which is fine, but that means that's helping cover a rate of return. Most water utilities are public sector. We ought to have an assistance program for low income in that sector that will enable us to do more for the working poor and enable us to have a rate structure that can generate the work we need to do.
It's funny with going on food stamps and I'm in Eastern Market, which is a very diverse, economically diverse neighborhood. I walk past the center every day with homeless folks around, as well as government contractors and members of Congress living in my neighborhood. And I heard about the medical assistance, but LIHEAP and water just we can talk offline about we're identifying some topics to cover with the next episode, the next season of the Water Show. We just finished our first 8 episodes, and what are those critical issues? And the water affordability, that was a factor in Flint. That has been a factor in so many cities, shrinking cities. Not every city is having population growth, and what that does to, as you mentioned, in terms of revenue for the water suppliers, are having to do all this work with less money coming in, with a population base that has less money to give. I think it'd be a fascinating topic. So
it's a great topic, and it's one that's so connected to so many things. Water is obviously essential to life. But in order to update water systems, that is the kind of work that you can take someone who is currently unemployed or underemployed and essentially getting assistance perhaps so there's money going out to government and give them a job updating infrastructure, which is improving the economy in the water system. And then you turn that into an economic generator of wealth, income, support. And the idea of how to make those to connect to good jobs, the total account balance, which I think would be positive, is a real opportunity.
And I particularly would love to explore this further at some point with respect to people passionate about water, our audience, which includes waterpreneurs. And people you mentioned here today, we're all in. Well, we see a lot of waterpreneurs who go all in because they're so passionate about some technology that some apps, some filters, some whatever that they've invented. And they get themselves in real financial trouble. Same thing for people like us, a nonprofit. It can be very personally, financially taxing.
And for someone who creates the next greatest thing, and I know they're out there, what they need is a market. And a market to buy it means revenue for enterprises like mine because we're the buyers. So it all does come back. The amount of positive upsurge in the economy that we can derive with jobs and revenues.
And an opportunity to communicate what that market is to the investors, to the foundations, to say, there is a need for some kind of startup grant that's going to get us out to California, that's going to get us a place to crash and have a few interns working with us while we put together, the grant proposals and the sponsor kits and the things that will get us to being a profitable nonprofit. But enough about me. and the industry, what's happening. But I did want to mention your couple things. So you described, and I don't usually share what I record on my device. It's kind of like when a reporter has a microphone. It's just for notes. But like I said, you really did a stellar job this morning. So I'm going to throw that up on the web if you're okay with that. And the Water Prize folks are okay with that. But what you described is the Bailey plant.
Correct.
Which congratulations, got the U.S. Water Prize. And we will be there in Atlanta. We just got our ticket to get down to Atlanta. And Radhika and Abby, thank you so much for the invitation to cover that. So what does that mean? You talked about, the challenges. A lot of utilities don't, they're smaller, they can't afford it. Part of the cost is dealing with regulators, dealing with the resistance there. That's been shifting. The EPA's position, a lot of this stuff has been shifting, whether it's the green infrastructure and other innovative things that you guys have been doing. Where do you still see resistance to innovation among other water utilities and the EPA, and what's shifting?
Sure. And some of the resistance that I see both within water utilities and in governing bodies like EPA or state or even local agencies, to me is well-founded. And I always use the analogy, I don't need any criticism of Coke because I drink plenty of it, Diet Coke anyways, but I remember when Coke changed to New Coke.
Yeah.
And it was a total flop, and they went back to classic Coke. It turned it into but imagine if you're a public sector enterprise and you try something new, many of which don't work, but it's water that you're dealing with. Yeah. You could create a public health threat if you tried the new gadget and it doesn't work. And that means your job is probably at risk, people are at risk, health is at risk. And second, unlike Coke, which could say new Coke didn't work, we're going to retool and go back to the classic Coke, public agencies don't have revenue that allow them to fix the problem of the mistaken new thing. Right. So for both of those reasons, I think water utilities are properly risk averse. They don't have the financial margin or a public health flexibility to be wrong. And when you can't be wrong, it's much harder to be entrepreneurial because entrepreneurs, not that they're wrong, but they often fail. And that's what's beautiful because sometimes they succeed spectacularly and it's the constant.
You get the hockey stick.
But in the water, we can't fail.
Yeah.
And so that naturally drives you to be really careful about the new things you try. So some of the inhibitions to innovation in the water sector to me is well-founded.
Yeah.
So the question then, and the other issue is on the regulatory is the same. When we were doing the Bailey facility that is getting the award, we had a lot of debate with our local agency about what the air quality issues were. Mm-hmm. And they were doing their job. nothing like the Bailey facility had ever been built before.
Yeah.
So the answer to the regulatory question, I didn't think was them doing anything wrong. It took a long time. We had to spend a lot of money, but it was partly because we were doing something new. No one had regulated it before. What are the emissions? How should we handle it? What's the right? And those were legitimate questions. But if you're first into a process, you're going to bear the costs of doing that switch, which means you're right about one thing. It's big enterprises that are going to be able to do that sort of thing, not smaller ones.
Well, and we had a couple of years ago, we did something called the Water Innovation Nation Year-End Celebration, which you can still find on YouTube. And it was a discussion with Shrier from DC Water, with Sally Gutierrez from EPA, with Elizabeth Thielen from the Water Council, with Ian Fisk from Sustainable Business Plan Competition, the Mentor Capital Network. And we had a live Shark Tank with a couple of waterpreneurs, and we do try to showcase some of the innovation, but that there is this LIFT program with the water and wastewater major organizations to help bridge that gap between the, oh my God, I've got the greatest technology in the world, this is going to save everything, and everybody should invest in me, and everybody should buy my thing, and everyone should incorporate immediately, and meet, so-called resistance from the utilities or the agencies in getting it permitted. How do we communicate to waterpreneurs, to water innovators, that what you're doing, what the EPA doing, is not necessarily, just trying to squash them from doing good things.
Yeah, and the best we can do at DC Water is communicate with them all the time. And what we've created is our own research program. It's pretty significant. That's what Shrier runs, so that we evaluate these on our own. So by the time we uptake them, we already have a good sense of how they work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most water utilities don't have that kind of wherewithal. So independent of other issues, the big utilities, I think, have to step up and create mechanisms that can do testing and evaluation, and then translate that information to the smaller utilities. They're smart people, hardworking. This is not that we're better than they are. We're just bigger. So we have the capacity to do some things that smaller utilities don't. So I'm very interested in moving into a world where we create a network where some of the bigger players who can do that can then translate that information. If there's facilities like ours, smaller scale, but in smaller places, well, they don't have to do all the research over again that we've done. To partner with what I call P2, public-to-public partnerships. So where can we advise our friends in collab so that they have a sense this does work. I know it's worked because it's worked at another utility like us. They can help us. And that can help the route of these entrepreneurs bring their products into the mainstream. What I would say to them, it's not an easy market, because of the risk aversion and the reality that we can't be wrong. There's very few industries that have that as you can design a new shoe and have it go wrong and can be fine. In the water industry, it's immediate public health threats. But on the other hand, the need for it is also growing. All the things we just talked about, old infrastructure, challenges to our ratepayers, mean that every utility, as hard as it is for them to adopt it because it's an unknown technology, they know they need it because it carries with it the prospect of better performance for lower cost. So I do think the world is shifting in the direction of these entrepreneurs. Can they hold on long enough for us to organize ourselves to be able to buy their ideas? I hope so, because we need them probably more than they need us. And it's just a matter of, can we get these two to connect?
One thing that I see a role for WaterCitizen Media Foundation, providing water news, education, and water attainment, and things like online courses, online masterminds, live events. And by the way, if you type comments below, we can actually see them and answer them. If not on air, then we'll do it. We'll come back to it on the watershow.org. But that, there was the role of the consultant, and I spent many years at Golder Associates and other firms, or CH2M Hill or CBM, and often they have that role for the utilities or the agencies to look at innovation. And one of the first questions you get on any project is, go find out what everybody else is doing, what worked and what didn't work, and do those case studies, which is essentially the stories that we share. These are not soundbite issues. You can't boil it down to, a bullet point of, well, yeah, East Bay Med did this, and San Francisco did that, and New York City did that, and whatever, that. So, gosh, I just thinking about how we can best capture and share and get out to that interested audience of providing more than a soundbite worth of shows to be able to share the experiences with an interested audience.
And I think that there's absolutely a role for a water citizen that's very important, because the other challenge for big utilities, even if we could provide some assistance to some of our smaller brethren, like I said, great people, very smart, just hard pressed, is we have so much of our own work to do. And there's only so many places that we can help. So there's got to be a mechanism that can take a voice, amplify it, and take it to many audiences at once. And that's what WaterCitizen does and can do. And I think that's going to be, and new technology allows that to happen. I mean, I think I see a world not far off from where we are now, where the transfer of technology and ideas and I love the consulting engineers. We hire lots of them at DC Water. The advantage of the P2, the public, is that if we're advising another public agency, we have no other stake in it. We're just trying to, you're one of our brethren. We'd like to give you the good advice that we hard won, and by the way, at significant cost to our ratepayers have developed, and then that will go on and spur activity in the marketplace. So ultimately, it will generate activity. A trusted advisor who's just like you, understands the pressures of a council and a mayor and all the pressures that we live under. I think it's a helpful ingredient, but it's just a piece of the whole. And a mechanism like yours to communicate that message to a broad audience all at once, I think is a vital piece.
Right. Well, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your time. And I will see you in Atlanta. And those of you out here, hopefully we'll set up in Atlanta as well and
continue.
Onward.
Thank you so much.